Plane is directed by Jean-Francois Richet. I'm sorry if I can't pronounce that name right. It stars Gerard Butler, Mike Coulter, and among others. And in this story, it deals with a commercial airline pilot, played by Gerard Butler, who's carrying passengers. That includes Mike Coulter's character, who's a fugitive in the custody. And basically, if you've seen from the trailers, there's some things that go down to where there's a storm that happens to where the plane ends up having to crash into this wilderness area that's in the Philippines. And it also ends up becoming pretty much a crisis to where the pilot has to essentially team up with the fugitive in order to save the passengers from these group of these hostiles that are in this territory when things go wrong. And now here's a little backstory. Now, this movie was directed by, this is from the director that did the remake of Assault on Precinct 13, which I saw bits and pieces of, but I remember liking that movie, but I just haven't fully seen it. And I also heard they directed Bloodfather, which I haven't seen, but I've heard a lot of good things about it, especially one of, if you've seen Eddie some years ago, he actually put a written review of that movie up that you're welcome to check out on the site. And from the trailers, it just got me curious because it seemed like we've been in this trend now of seeing Gerard Butler carrying out these kind of kind of low-grade action type movies that are the equivalent of essentially like B-level type movies that you would see on like the direct-to-video market in a good way, because it seems like Gerard Butler doesn't really get much of the mainstream attention like he used to, but when he does and he gets occasional movies that come out in theaters, I always get to see what he's up to next, because he always does have a lot of great range as an actor, and especially his action films. And he really puts 100% into all of his action movies that I can see on screen. And the last one I remember really enjoying that he did was Cop Shop. And so when I saw the previews of this, I didn't really think much of it because I thought it was just going to be your typical, standard movie that was more like in the lines of like Air Force One or like Passenger 57, which, those kind of like planes in danger type movies, or like those movies that involve hostiles and stuff like that, or terrorists taking over and stuff like that. And so I didn't think much of it. But upon seeing the film, I can say that this was actually a pleasant surprise. This was actually a really fun movie that I couldn't get enough of. It has its flaws for sure in a lot of things that you've seen and done in other films, but the movie just has such a great, kinetic style to it, to where I was able to oversee that because I like the mixture of grittiness that it takes and a lot of, kind of throwback to what you would see in like kind of like certain 90s action films, especially Air Force One. Or another one that comes to mind is probably some other films directed by Paul Greengrass, like some of the Bourne movies, the way it's kind of shot in that kind of style. But to get my pros out of the way, I thought Gerard Butler was great in this. He really carries it, not only in the action departments, but also just in the emotional scenes as well, especially when he's really trying to save his passengers and do everything he can, because it explains a certain backstory you get to know about him, where he's dealt with kind of situations before in similar fashion as when dealing with hostiles and stuff, and so he's no stranger to what he's doing. But what I really like about his character is just the way that he has to essentially go throughout the film, and for the most part, he's not even really hardly using weapons, and that's one of the few things that I appreciate that the movie was able to take a vulnerability to the side of our main character, where he's mainly relying on Mike Coulter having to basically be like seeking through everything. I thought that was really interesting, and that was great. And then one of the other things I appreciate too, the way the movie goes along, is it keeps it in line with having to make the action very, easy to see, and it gets very gritty in a lot of parts where you see a lot of shootouts take place and stuff. And there's actually some really great camera work that I thought really blended well. It was like I was watching a Michael Mann movie in a great way. Now, if this movie would have been directed by Michael Mann or Paul Greengrass, I would have probably, I could really see a lot more of the things that those directors were more known for, because there are certain points where the camera does get a little janky at times, where there's not always seeing a lot of things on screen because you see off-screen kills at times. But I still appreciate that because the movie goes along with you keeping on that kind of intenseful edge of it. And so I thought that was great. And, the way that the movie also plays along the story with having Gerard Butler and Mike Coulter having to team up together, I thought really worked. And they had a lot of great chemistry together. And it really blended well with a lot of the stuff that was going along with the film. And then on top of that, I really got to appreciate the way the movie isn't shying away with certain funny moments that I thought made some great dark humor at times. I thought really worked. And got to tell you, there's some pretty over the top deaths in this film. There's some pretty great deaths in this film that I didn't see coming. Like, not gonna go into spoil. Let's just say that there's a part where a person gets their head smashed by the plane itself in one part. And there's a whole fight scene that's kind of shot in almost like it's shot in one take with Gerard Butler and another person. And I thought it was just really intenseful, and it didn't have any music playing, which I thought was very surprising. And so the movie does keep it on what you expect with playing along with a lot of intenseful scenes, especially when there's a whole scene where there's hostages being taken over by these hostiles, these terrorists, and it just really had a lot of great, intenseful moments that I couldn't really see where it was going. But I mean, there's more I can go into detail. But if I have any kind of cons that really holds the movie back from being, great as far as like really great, it would be that it is very familiar territory where the characters are not very original, where they're kind of rinse and repeat of what you've seen in other films. And if you know the way that certain plots go, if a lot of these kind of hostile or these kind of terrorism type movies, you kind of know where it's going. And there's certain things that characters do that get them in trouble, that make them do dumb choices. And there's also a section of the film where it seemed like the stuff that's involving with Tony Goldwyn's character, who's essentially trying to send a rescue team operations, it almost seems like it's in a different type of film, because even though it does tie together with the rest of the film, it seems like we were cutting away from a lot of the essence of what was going on with the main stuff with Gerard Butler. And on top of that, yeah, there was some noticeable CGI at times, like when you see the plane in the air at certain areas, that it does look a little cheesy at times, and it kind of reminds me of some of the effects that they did with like Air Force One, with how that CGI in that film with the plane sequence, like at the end of that movie, had it to when the plane crashed. It kind of reminded me of that, but it didn't bother me too much because it was only a couple times when they used it. So I thought that was kind of like my other minor cons. So with that, I'm going to give Plane a compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter. And so, for those of you who have also seen Plane, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.